always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
3 minutes after the hour, thank you for joining us once again on the Dr. Sky Experience, as we call it Theater of the Mind, bringing you the many mysteries of the universe with great guests, as you tell us. The contact number for our 2-hour show is always 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. Thanking ahead of time our helmsmen, Tony and Bill, making sure that this radio signal is as powerful as you would expect. And you better believe it, ladies and gentlemen, broadcasting proudly from the center of the universe, New York City, around the nation, and around the world. In this particular episode, in hour number 1 of the Dr. Sky Experience, tonight's adventure, we dig deeper into the stories and mysteries of the UFO conundrum. You've probably heard so many guests and so many people talking about this subject, but don't change the dial, because we've got something that I think is really show-stopping in our opinion. This information, ladies and gentlemen, centers around a number of topics. As President John Donald Trump wants to, of course, release information on the whole UFO story, we're hearing that he might be looking forward to giving us some news in the area of disclosure. So hopefully President Trump will do that, and that is one of the topics we'll talk about. Also, as we dig deeper into the subject, how about a United States Air Force general that's been missing for quite some time, and a partner that worked with him missing since June of 2025. The mystery continues. But who better to talk about these particular subjects is no stranger to the microphone. He himself has been on this particular program and many others around the nation. You've probably heard of him. Darcy Weir. He is a UFO researcher, a filmmaker, and he comes to us, ladies and gentlemen, tonight from his location to share with us his information and yours about this whole UFO mystery. Darcy, thanks for joining us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Thanks for taking the time.
Dr. Sky, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and let's get talking about all these interesting things that are going on.
Absolutely, folks. And of course, if you want to learn more about Darcy, check out occultjourneys.com. That's occultjourneys.com. He's a filmmaker, and those films shoot to the top, ladies and gentlemen, in popularity on the subject. Let's talk a little bit about the president. President Donald John Trump, now saying in many circles that hopefully he's looking to release some information we hear about maybe some full disclosure. What say you about that? Is that something real, or who knows what it is? Tell us more.
Wow. Well, it's a developing story as we speak. Every day that goes by, I'm hearing different intricacies of, what's alleged to be happening. I think the major thing is that people are expecting the UFO files, right? Let's call it the big release of secrets. But from what he's indicated, there's two things that have me kind of skeptical as to the veracity, the quality of the files that will be released. The first thing is that Pete Hegseth, about a week or two ago, he remarked that AARO, the All-Domain Resolution Office, is going to be handling that release. And in the UFO community, that's a huge sort of no-no. Not a lot of people trust AARO because what AARO seems to have been doing since its inception has been catching all stories, all alleged UFO encounters, analyzing them and debunking them. So that goes back to the 2017 release of the UAP videos that are now quite famous, the Go Fast, the Gimbal, everything that we saw, the Tic Tac, since the New York Times bombshell release. They've called all that stuff prosaic. And that kind of upset a lot of the community because we figured AARO might have been something that was stood up to, bring justice to the UFO or UAP story. So when Pete Hegseth said that, I was, many others were a little bit disconcerted about that. And then this week, Anna Paulina Luna, she remarked that instead of Arrow, it might be the FBI that's going to be releasing this information. So it seems like they're kind of, I guess they're adjusting based on what they're seeing from people reacting in the community. Because, obviously Arrow was like a huge no-no. Now they're saying FBI, but, people are even dubious as to whether the FBI knows what they're doing these days. And hey, even the FBI is looking after General Castleman's case, so it all kind of comes full circle.
Well, let's go to the audience here, ladies and gentlemen. The question that we pose in this particular first hour of the Dr. Sky Experience: do you have any value or faith in the fact that we'll ever hear the truth on this? Or do you really feel there is hope, as many people out there study this subject? Our very special guest is filmmaker and UFO researcher Darcy Weir. Commentary here is always welcome in the Theater of the Mind at 1-800-848-9222. Darcy, I've done some research on my own. I don't know if you have even heard of this particular website, or your opinion if you have. A website called governmentattic.org, claiming that it does post some of the Freedom of Information files that many people out there hardly ever get to see. It's more of a website to compile information on a various number of subjects. Have you heard of this particular website? Because I'm looking at it as we're talking live right now.
Yeah, I have checked it out. You did alert me to this last time we spoke on air,
Okay.
Believe it or not. Yeah.
It's interesting. And it has a Latin phrase that goes along with it. As this early morning and late evening, we don't want to put people to sleep, but it's known as videre licet. And in Latin, it translates simply to this in English: it's permitted to see. So whoever's behind all this organization, I have no idea. It's probably a private group because it's a .org. Hopefully more of these files people can research on their own. But it's interesting as we talk about these subjects right now. I mean, it seems to be the question that nobody can seem to answer. Here's some of the things that I think puzzle people. UFO sightings, switching on and off nuclear, missiles underground at will. The ability to, how do I say this? Interdimensional beings is one of the theories. I mean, I'm not smart enough to know that. I don't think anybody in the quantum world even understands that at all. And then this Project Bluebeam, which was the fake alien invasion concept here. And it's just so amazing. I mean, I guess the question I would ask, simplicity, why have we never been told this? I mean, what's the big deal if we find out so many stars from the astronomical side are sun-like, the billions and trillions? Why would we be so arrogant to think that we're the only species in the universe? And I guess the reason we could do that is because we could think we are, correct?
Yeah, and I think to what the three sort of scenarios of non-human intelligence that you were kind of just alluding to coming from, right? So when you look at the stars, the longest held theory in the UFO community, going back to the Roswell crash, is that what we're being visited by, that the government might have been keeping a tight lid on, or the militaries of the world, the military-industrial complex, is a non-human extraterrestrial theory, right? Like a alien from another star. But then we talk about the quantum world and dimensions that are all around us beyond fourth, fifth, sixth, 8 up to 8 plus 1, which is time. Yes. And then we're talking about the extra dimensional non-human intelligence that may be around us all the time, but we can't quite see them because we're stuck in this 3D third dimension, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's all these other things that people hypothesize, like something at the bottom of the oceans, or something underground that's been living here kind of out of sight, out of sound, away from us, that may be evolving at its own rate, maybe older than us, maybe just trying to stay away from us because we're the dangerous land dwellers. I don't know. But
yes,
that's the crypto-terrestrial theory. So there's all kinds of theories as to, explaining UFOs. And I think the last one you could definitely not give up on is a lot of this stuff just military hardware that is so top secret, so black, in terms of the projects that are hidden from our mainstream reality, that, the intelligences, the, three-letter agencies of the world consistently convince us that it's aliens so that they don't have to out their own technology.
Well, Darcy, my own personal experience has been interesting, too. I mean, I'm 70 years young now, but in college days, earlier than that, I had the chance of meeting Betty Hill, the Barney and Betty Hill experience, many, many times. Travis Walton, obviously, a movie made about him with Fire in the Sky, and so many other people. I mean, I just sat there and listened when I was much younger, and even recently here in Arizona with Travis. And I said to myself, why would somebody go to all this extent? They're not looking to make big money off of this. That was never the intention of those people. I think you would agree. And then if you take the astronomical, not to be overly repetitive, the sheer number of volume of stars that are like us and the distances involved, that could be the problem. How do they traverse time and space? Well, maybe they figured it out. But it seems more likely. But again, I guess I wonder, not naively, why the heck do we never get to hear the answer to this? Because it must be something that would either shake the foundation of how we do business in this world, or even in our religious circles. What say you? I mean, maybe those are two plausible reasons not to tell us about this. Who knows?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be part of the conversation, the religious side of things. You could even hear that certain Republicans that have seen UFO files or have been part of the conversation in Congress recently went public in 2025 and they said, we believe these are angels and demons, that UFOs are related to that. So I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think that, we live in a religious world and people will equate certain phenomenon to their ideology, to their worldview. And that's not mine. I'm more of a, scientific-minded person, and I leave the possibilities for a non-human intelligence being extraterrestrial or some other source that has a scientific root. But, to each their own. And that's the beauty of democracy and liberty in the West, right? People can choose to believe and understand the world the way they want to.
All right, we're free to do that. But I go deeper on this, and I know you document all these things, and we'll get into some of the great documentaries that you've produced here with credible people and also people that, of course, have an interest in this. But to our audience out there, the vast audience of the Dr. Sky Experience, Talk Radio 77 WABC, what's your take on this, ladies and gentlemen? You've heard this theme over and over. And I'll be honest, Darcy, some people are just fed up and tired of hearing their same old rendition, not that you're doing that, of this whole UFO story. But we come, I think, in a little different perspective with our guests, and I'm giving you a compliment on this. I really am. Because if people go to your website and look at the things you produced, occultjourneys.com, I think they might. We can't bend people's arms or shake their legs, but 1-800-848-9222 gets you into the theater of the mind here. And why do we call it a theater of the mind? Because obviously it's not a visual. It's in your mind. And so many of the guests that we have, Darcy, I think it was a good way to describe what you would want to hear late at night, no matter where you are around the world. Maybe it's daylight where you're listening, but opening our minds to these great mysteries, and you're helping us do that. Let me ask you straight up. Of all the whistleblowers that you've heard testimony, you followed this better than just about anybody, who do you feel has been the most credible, and in what way are they credible to you in the sense that they've given us things that, wow, That was like an earthquake there in the congressional hearings and what have you. Who has impressed you the most so far?
Well, I still stay pretty confident that Luis Elizondo, who formerly was with the Pentagon working on the ATIP program, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, yes. He kind of got sheep-dipped after that. The Pentagon said he never did anything and discredited him. But you had people he met when he was doing all this who vouched for him, like Christopher Mellon. And they released those videos that we were discussing, the Tic Tac, the gimbal, the Go Fast. That blew this subject open in 2017. I mean, I don't think it would still be relegated to UFO conferences, UFO book sales, and it would be super niche. It wouldn't be something that would be discussed so broadly on national news, international news, TV, what have you, unless that event happened. So I think that was pretty much the biggest whistleblower in UFO history, in my opinion.
Well, in mine, I mean, I've listened to and I've followed this pretty closely, maybe not as deep as you because of time permitting or not. David Grush impressed me, the whistleblower who testified. And if you're not sure, ladies and gentlemen, who we're talking about, Darcy can qualify this deeper than I can. But one whistleblower, in the congressional testimony, was asked by one of the congresswomen about, do we basically have artifacts, meaning flying saucers, if you want to call them that, or alien craft? And what about bodies, in so many words? They used much more fancy terms. And both answers were given affirmative from David Grush. And then I said to myself, well, he couldn't reveal any more to the general public. So he said, we must go into this skiff. And that's this very secret, like a big container where you can't have your phones or anything. So apparently, if that's his statement of truth, they must know exactly all the details. What say you? That's common sense, right?
Yeah, I think David Grush is definitely super important to this whole disclosure phenomenon culturally. Mm-hmm. If Lou Elizondo is the guy that threw the Hail Mary, David Grush is the guy that caught it downfield and got it into the end zone, in terms of keeping the story relevant and making people interested in this in the mainstream news and so on. Right now, he hasn't provided any of the evidence that he spoke to, post the News Nation bombshell interview with Ross Coulthart and the Politico release in, I think it was 2023 now, I believe. Yeah. And so that's the sort of tricky part. We don't have the evidence for his claims, but we do know that he held the position that he did and was asked to look into all of these secrets and find the special access programs that may be in charge of reverse engineering craft and housing and containing exotic technologies and possible alien cadavers and stuff like that, right? So
sure.
I believe his testimony. He seems very eloquent, intelligent, and honest. But it's not like he said the stuff and then released a bunch of things like we had in 2017, right? It would have been great if we had him leak a whole bunch of things too, But,
well, that's why I recommend to the audience, if you haven't watched the entire testimony, there's a number of these hearings that were held. It would behoove you, in my opinion, not homework, but just by sheer interest to get more educated on this subject. And another person that impressed me was David Fravor, one of the flight, squadron leaders off the Nimitz with his F-18 flying with his partner and seeing this incredible thing that looked like a gigantic Tic Tac, which defied all the laws of gravity and physics, according to them. I mean, these people are not making it up. And also the FLIR cameras, the thermal imaging cameras, taking pictures of this. Something's up there, and it's a hot subject. And I just wonder how many people out there have an opinion on this. I'm sure everybody has one. And you get into the theater of the mind at 1-800-848-9222 with our special guest, Darcy Weir. Darcy, I don't want to steal away from the content of what you're providing, but we have about 5 minutes or so, and maybe a little more before the hard break at the bottom of the hour. But I wanted to get your take on something that Steven Spielberg is apparently going to release on June 12th of this year. Some call it Disclosure Day. That hasn't, I think, been an official title. What's your take on that? Because people seem to be very interested in what he might be producing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the film, just as many other people out there are eagerly awaiting. But I've followed his comments. He's been interviewed recently at some conferences and stuff, and he says flat out, this film is not a documentary. It is a thrilling science fiction dramatic film, and he's really good at producing those.
He sure is. Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of story he does with Disclosure Day. Disclosure of what is the big question, right? Is it disclosure of non-human intelligence living on our planet that is doing something nefarious? Aliens, in other words, extraterrestrials? Or is it something else? They don't really show that in the trailer. They do show some sort of alien talk or speech or something that happens with what's the actress's name? I can't remember, but it looks really interesting.
Well, hopefully it's a better looking alien than in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That one was a little bit on the light side. I mean, maybe an alien is that thin, but can't knock it, because at least it opened our minds about that possibility. And Devil's Tower, of course, is the location. That was the ground zero, of course, if people haven't seen that movie. But just amazing stuff. Darcy Weir is our special guest, ladies and gentlemen. 1-800-848-9222. A short 1 hour with him as we continue to move through time and space here. And that's literally what maybe some of these craft are doing, if they can figure out, maybe they have, right, Darcy, the ability to move through space-time. That would be one of the greatest conundrums that face us now in the world of quantum physics. And if you could do that, it would be pretty easy for these craft to be able to navigate through the heavens by those kind of concepts. I mean, that's just totally mind-boggling. And for now, the stuff of science fiction, but maybe not.
Yeah, it would seem like gods of technology to us.
Totally amazing. And then one quick theory that many people have thrown out there, and they've talked about it, maybe we should write a book, or maybe somebody has already. If humans all started in the early days living in caves, and then, because of nuclear war and all the other problems that face the war, and as we continue to see here in the Middle East, who knows, maybe in the future, if extincted, that was the human species, the rest of the people went underground, and maybe somehow they melded together with AI. Don't laugh, ladies and gentlemen. And that the ability for AI, it doesn't have a body of, I say, a biologic. What if it could warp space-time and have the ability to move through space-time both forward and backward? Maybe simply, what, Darcy? These Tic Tacs could be something of kind of a sentient being with great powers that we have no idea from our own future. Maybe we have to look closer, not farther. What say you?
Yeah, I'd say Disclosure Day may even be talking about that thesis. I'm not convinced it's aliens. It might be future terrestrials, in other words, like
exactly what I was saying. Mm-hmm.
Human 3.0, the most advanced, human being of the future, that they're kind of visually distinguishable as a human, but much superior. I don't know.
We all don't know, Darcy. That's why we have people like yourself to keep us on the straight and narrow with all the information that comes to us. Sometimes it's hard to believe what you read on the internet because it's hard to read it because everything has all these ads coming through and they want you to subscribe. Okay, some of them are good to be able to subscribe. But what I'm saying is an open forum like this Theater of the Mind, we try to bring the best, and I believe we have with having you and other like-minded guests. When we return, ladies and gentlemen, from the hard break, I'd like to play, if we can do that, a short interlude, a little bit of a news clip about a subject that I want Darcy to comment on. And that happens to be the strange disappearance of a retired United States Air Force general, William McCaslin's, and also about a year ago, almost to the date, another person that worked with him, Monica Reza, out there in New Mexico in a very strange scenario. Where are these people? Kind of a Nancy Guthrie kind of story. Maybe not a kidnapping per se, but a very interesting story nonetheless. And before we go to that break, just remind everybody to go to occultjourneys.com. We'll get into some of those conversations with him and some of the documentaries he's produced, and your questions and comments like Frank in Maine, Max in Manhattan, and many of you, ladies and gentlemen, at 1-800-848-9222. Theater of the Mind is open, and we'll be right back.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, my name is Eric von Däniken. I'm from Switzerland, and I'm the author of books like Chariots of the Gods and many others. I am proud to be in the Dr. Sky show. Always watch the sky. The big mysteries and miracles are out there, and we always will be surprised. The Dr. Sky show is the best one in this belonging in this country.
Don't you believe in flying saucers, they ask me? Don't you believe in telepathy? How about ancient astronauts in the Bermuda Triangle? What about life after death? No, I reply. No, no, no. And the person asked, don't you believe in anything? And the answer was yes, I said. I believe in evidence. A quote from one of the great science fiction writers of all time, Isaac Asimov. 32 minutes after the hour, we continue with Darcy Weir. And let's go to the calls, Darcy, and lighten it up like a candle. Let's say good morning to Frank in Maine. Good morning, Frank. You're on with Darcy.
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Always a pleasure to have and talk to you, and to have you on my radio and talk to you. And Mr. Darcy, always a pleasure as well. My question, and I guess you guys are going to discuss it, is about General McFarland and how his disappearance and many other people who have disappeared or have seen these unidentified flying objects or actually have experienced them, like Mr. Zamora down in New Mexico, the policeman who's a credible witness, how these people get either discredited or they just disappear into thin air and nobody knows where they are. And my question is, what's the correlation between the UFO investigations that we are going on now and the disappearances? I mean, could we see like, well, these things don't exist because these people aren't around and they're just like crazy, or they're just experiencing like natural phenomena. You know what I'm saying? Like,
good point. Good point, Frank. You bring it up. I'm telling you, always right on measure. Darcy, that's interesting what Frank's talking about here. That deserves a really good answer back.
Yeah, I think, Frank, you're onto something that many of us are suspicious about right now. So, of course, General Neil McCasland has gone missing. He's been missing for just over 3 weeks now. February 27th, officially, he disappeared an hour after he checked in with his wife around 11 a.m. And what went with him was apparently his .38 caliber and wallet and some clothes. And he was supposed to be going hiking. His wife said that he would never go with a .38 cal hiking, so there's suspicion that he was in fear for his life, possibly at this time. The other thing that's strange is that, he's been gone so long, but there's no trace. There just hasn't been. They searched multiple properties. They had over 700 homes canvassed, and they used drones. They've used multiple personnel. The FBI is involved now. At the time in his life that he went missing, he was claiming to have suffered from mental fog. And he actually had to step down from some of his duties for some local companies he was working for due to this mental fog.
Well, let's say thank you to Frank. I'm sorry to cut everybody short here. We have a very big board of callers here. But, Frank, always on measure. Thank you for being part of our experience, the Dr. Sky experience. Let's have our helmsman play from Legacy Media an introduction to the story about this missing general and his partner that worked there, another scientist who was developing a super alloy. And it sounds something like this.
Now to New Mexico, and the latest on the urgent hunt for a retired Air Force general who vanished nearly 3 weeks ago. The FBI is now helping local authorities in the search for William Neal McCasland. Investigators say the 68-year-old former general had some sort of brain fog before he disappeared, but they stress that he was not cognitively impaired.
There's no indication, and we are not putting forward, that Mr. McCasland was disoriented, confused. Arguably, he would still be the most intelligent person in the room that any of us would be in. Highly intelligent, highly capable. But that information was given to us early on, and out of an abundance of caution, we escalated to a silver alert.
Now, before retiring, General McCasland oversaw a highly classified program linked to UFO research. And many are wondering if that secretive work past and researching UFOs could have made him a target somehow. Even if you're a UFO skeptic, it's hard not to be curious about another strange aspect of this case. A former colleague of General McCasland's, who also disappeared, also under strange circumstances last summer. Is it all a coincidence? Let's go to Alex Capriello, live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Alex, what are you hearing about?
That's an interesting bit of information there, ladies and gentlemen, because Legacy Media is reporting this, and obviously not in a hype-type situation. They're just reporting it. Darcy, that's very, very interesting, because Monica Reza also, as I'm reading this, and you can corroborate it, back on June 22nd of this past year, near Los Angeles, she was on a hike in an area called the Mount Waterman Trail. She was an Aerojet Rocketdyne, scientist developing a super alloy. This is so strange when you two people like that have, a lot to offer. Something's up with that, obviously.
Yeah, and she was supposedly working with McCasland. The way she she disappeared is even stranger. So it's alleged, News Nation did a review of this, that she was hiking on a California forest trail with a colleague, smiling and waving, and, all of a sudden her colleague turned around and Reza was just vanished.
Amazing. Totally
they
incredible
couldn't find
stuff.
any trace of her. So really strange. But, I'll go back to McCasland real quick.
Mm-hmm. Please.
Something that people don't fully know about his history is that he actually is linked to Lou Elizondo.
Ooh.
He possibly was the person who helped connect Tom DeLonge to Lou Elizondo back in the day, which led to Lou Elizondo going public eventually, the 2017 release, and then the To the Stars Academy, association that they started afterwards. So,
like a mystery novel that doesn't have an end. It's just incredible. We have to continue with the callers here, my friend Darcy, because obviously I'm trying to get everybody's opinion in. Let's say good morning to Max in Manhattan. He's been patient. You're on with Darcy Weir. Thanks for your patience.
Yes, Dr. Sky, Darcy. Thank you for taking my call. I'm taken aback when I hear these, especially these Hollywood folk, screaming, "Yeah, just release this information. We can take it. We're mature people." We cannot take it. This would be too tough. Why? Because we're used to being the most powerful nation in the world. When we have to confront this new nation or these new aliens, these new beings, it's a whole nother story. What happened when we landed on the moon and we were approached by a couple of aliens and they said to us, "Don't come back here, turn around and get out of here." If we were that powerful, we could have blown them out of the sky, and we didn't. Why? Because they could be more powerful than we are, and we haven't confronted them. Secondly, what about all the rapes that have taken place? When you get someone, male or female, that have been sucked up into these UFOs, and they go through an enormous pain in just relating the story about what happened to them.
Well, you're right, Max, on one. Right, not to cut you off, but Betty Hill had told me many times, and Travis Walton, that they did things that, well, we don't really need to go into, but I think you were bringing it up. Exploitation of the humankind, that's not good that way, but who knows? But in the interest of time, Max, I appreciate the commentary. You're interesting, very interesting in what you're saying. Darcy, your response. This is an interesting gentleman here calling in.
Yeah, Max, some great points there. I mean, the moon landing of Apollo 11, that has rumored to have also coincided with possible extraterrestrial intervention. It's a rumor. I mean, we don't have any concrete proof that happened, but if it did, wowie zowie, that'd be pretty cool and an exciting reality to live in my opinion. But yeah, it is I guess it's challenging for the rest of society if we're confronted with the idea that we're not the masters of our universe and the top of the food chain, so to speak, right?
Absolutely, Darcy. Yeah, you're right. But Max brings up some interesting things. Right.
People already understand that to some degree when it comes to religion. We already submit to the idea that God is above us. So we're just adding something else that's above us. And that's okay too, right?
Absolutely. Hopefully someday we'll find this out, but maybe what Max is talking about is maybe we can't handle it. Who knows? Because it would upset the balance of power. If indeed these aliens can traverse human, time and space, and we can barely go to, Mach 4 in an aircraft at this point in time. But you got to wonder where we got all this technology from, and that's another big mystery here on the Dr. Sky Experience. What I'm going to say to you, Darcy, is I wanted to go into your individual documentaries, but I think time may not permit, so I'm going to give a shout-out to occultjourneys.com. And just in about a minute or so before the break, just describe some of the things that they'll get to see there. So many of the great documentaries that I'm not doing justice to because of the time element. Just tell us briefly.
Yeah, I've covered abduction, which Max brought up. I've done a documentary called Being Taken, which covers Betty and Barney Hill. I interviewed Travis Walton, and we cover many other cases. We also cover the Pascagoula case of 1973 with Calvin and Charlie. So that's called Pascagoula 73. It's on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV. If you search my name, Darcy Weir, on both those platforms, you will see a massive catalog of films that are in the UFO realm. I even did two Bigfoot ones, so check them out.
Thank you so much. More with Darcy Weir. Time permits, of course. The other callers that are waiting, Dennis in Washington, D.C., Jeff in Brooklyn Heights, Anna in Manhattan, We'll do our very best to get you on the air. And if time permits, more at 1-800-848-9222. We will be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Howdy, this is Jim Mars, author of Alien Agenda, the top-selling nonfiction book on UFOs in the world. And I'm here to say, watch the sky. Dr. Sky, that is. right here on this station.
47 minutes after the hour, we go to the callers for the interest of time. Let's say good morning to Ina in Manhattan. You've been patient. You're on with Darcy Weir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Dr. Skies. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes,
alien is real, and they are powerful, too. I was going to the Middle East, and after we left, we stopped in Paris, and after we board the next plane to Paris, and we drive around maybe an hour, we fly around an hour, and there was this two flying saucer, a big flying saucer, and most of the people were sleeping, and their state was down. But I was next to the first class, so I'm at the window, and there come this flying saucer, like he was guiding us. And at one time, the plane engine goes like it was going to go down, and I make the sign of the cross. I said, please, don't do that. Right. Yes, and that alien was the bald-head one with the two nuts at the side with big green eyes.
You saw all this? Wow. Yeah, Ina, that's amazing. God bless you. Well, at least the plane had a successful landing, right? I mean, you didn't have any further trouble, right? That's good.
Right. But you know what he did? I took out my camera to take a picture, and the camera couldn't work. And when I reached Yemen, the camera didn't work for 3 days. It wouldn't work. He blocked my camera. It's when I come back to New York, it worked.
Well, Ina, thank you for your testimony. I want Darcy, who's got way more experience on these type of incidents. Thank you for testifying on the Dr. Sky experience. Darcy, that's a pretty powerful story.
Yeah, another experiencer. Thanks for giving us your story.
It's amazing stuff. Let's go to Jeff in Brooklyn Heights. You've been patient. You're on with Darcy Weir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for taking my call. You know, I go back to the 1950s with Colonel Rupert and, you know, all the early investigators.
Yes.
And I've watched this movement all my life. And the thing is that it never really gets anywhere. There's allegations, there's denials. One thing is needed here, and it never happens. There needs to be a serious scientific investigation of what's happening here. You have cases where you have areas where these things are coming over repeatedly. You need someone who's sitting there with a aircraft ready to go. You need to get near the phenomena with basic scientific instruments and do some basic readings. You need somebody to get near to it enough with a basic spectrum analyzer, magnetic sensing, and most of all, gravatic measurements, because that's the thing. These things have got to be free of gravity and inertia. Now, there's instruments that would be able to test certain basic parameters of that. All these UFO people are great at storytelling, they're great at speculation, but never ever do they do this serious investigation of these things, and the only way to do that is get near enough to the phenomena with the kind of testing instruments that would give us a start to what we're dealing with.
Well, Jeff, you've given me some great inspiration. You're one of my best friends as far as listening to the conversation. You're right. We need to attach scientific, ready-to-go stuff, and obviously, you know, training more people to be able to report more seriously by giving it, you know, a lot of science and backing it up with science. Darcy, your quick comment. We're going to go on and try to get everybody on the show here, but I think Jeff brings up some really amazing common sense things. Let's do it with science
Jeff.
at the ready go.
Absolutely. We need to have this scientifically openly studied. I don't think it's going to happen, though, unless full disclosure happens. Otherwise, the science conducted to research this stuff will always be behind closed doors.
We now go to Dennis in Washington, D.C. He's been patient. Dennis, you have to be brief. We're trying to get as many people in, but you got the floor. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. For your guest, I'm an author. I've written a book called Full Disclosure, We're Not Alone. And I'm not a ufologist. I just connect the dots. And we're not alone, in my opinion. And I'd like to know your opinion on what you think this is all coming down to as far as, are we alone? Are we not alone? What's your opinion?
I think it's very possible that we are not alone. I think the Drake equation scientifically proves that there's, millions of civilizations in our galaxy alone, and if they're able to traverse, travel across the stars somehow and come visit us, maybe that's what's happened in the past, and these experiencers that have come forward in the ufology, that they're telling us the truth. I think that's possible.
Good commentary and good information, Dennis, in Washington, D.C. Let's move on as we wrap up our show here, trying to get everybody on the air here. Patiently, Frederick in Brooklyn. You're on the air with Darcy Weir. Thanks for being patient. Well, what say you?
Yes, Dr. Sky. I am curious to know, is there been a landing on the moon, or is there not? Is there any concrete evidence that the scientists had landed on the moon or not?
Good question, Frederick. Darcy, why don't you take a jump at that one and a stab, because I'll jump in too later on after your comment.
If we landed on the moon? Sorry,
I
what
think
was
that's
the
what
question?
Frederick's asking. If we did, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, Frederick, I think we did. I think there's plenty of proof that astronauts went up into space and they carried out a progression of scientific feats in order to eventually bridge to the moon, go into cislunar space, do spacewalks, extra vehicle activities, getting outside of capsules and such, and they finally got around the moon, landed. But I think, in my opinion, not everything was televised. I think that some photos were also scrubbed and they kept certain truths about the moon from the public. That's my opinion.
Well, here we go, Frederick. This is my part of it, and these are from experiences talking to these different moonwalkers. And even if I didn't, there's a NASA spacecraft called a Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. So if you look it up, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, it's still there. ASU here, Arizona State University, has like a little command center for it. It has imaged every one, and in the talks I give out here and around the country, I show this evidentiary from this spacecraft that orbits about 20 to 40 miles above the lunar surface. They show Apollo 11, the descent module. They show all the other Apollos, including the footprints and including the tracks of the lunar rovers. Now, maybe people could say, well, that's been, photoshopped. Anything can be. But no. How did we get 840-plus pounds of moon rocks back to the, from the moon to the Earth? They didn't have FedEx. They didn't have Amazon. Not to be funny. But there is concrete evidence there. And I'm sure, this is my wish, Darcy, I think you could, expand on it too, what Frederick's talking about, is that with Elon Musk technology, why don't we land close to, but not on that sacred landing site of Apollo 11 or the others, and set up a very high-definition television camera, and for once and for all, show us. But then again, when astronauts return, Apollo 12 astronauts, Pete Conrad, landed very close. Apollo 12 had a near-precision landing because it wanted to go out and take a piece of the Surveyor spacecraft. So why don't we do that again and go back? Frederick, great commentary, and I hope those answers are sufficient. Darcy, you get the last word, as all of our special guests, occultjourneys.com. Sorry we don't have a lot of time. I know these one-hour interviews really don't get the bang for the buck, in my opinion, but nonetheless, I appreciate you giving us what you have. You get the final say.
Hey, I'm looking forward to seeing what Donald Trump's administration bring forward in terms of disclosure this year. I'm also looking forward to Disclosure Day, the movie. People want to check out some of my documentary films. They're available on Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Apple TV. Just search my name, Darcy Weir. And you can check out my website. I have a bunch of my film posters there, trailers, and you can click on the poster. It goes right through to a site for you to watch the film. My website, occultjourneys.com. Occult Journeys on Twitter, Facebook, Darcy Weir, Instagram, Darcy Weir Films. And I do have a little podcast you can find on Spotify and Apple called UFO Review, where I do a bit of an extra features discussion on themes I've covered in my documentaries over the years.
Thank you, Darcy. Always a friend, and thank you for your information. I'm sure the audience really appreciates it. Let's do it again, and hopefully in a longer format, with your permission. You have a good morning.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Have a great morning. Thank you, sir. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2, we shift gears slightly. We talk more in the aviation world, and we also talk to a retired lieutenant colonel from the United States Marine Corps. He was involved with Marine Light Attack Squadron, that is the Helicopter Squadron 369, known as the Gunfighters. What's it like to fly one of these most amazing Cobra helicopters, the AH-1Z Viper, and so much more. But he's here, as I am, to honor those that have lost their lives so far in Operation Epic Fury, our fight against Iran with the Israelis. And that we'll talk about, ladies and gentlemen, as we honor the crew of the KC-135, known as Zeus 95, and your questions and comments. A man who knows a lot about what goes on in war, and his commentary, even though he doesn't work directly for the Department of War as he's retired. He has a lot of information to share with you and his company, ladies and gentlemen, that we'll talk about, Strategic Resilience Group, LLC. Stay tuned for hour number 2, just around the corner on the Dr. Sky Experience.
Always look to the sky. The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience, proudly here on this big, powerful blowtorch radio station, heard around the nation and around the world. Yes, Talk Radio 77 WABC. Also proudly broadcasting from the center of the universe, New York City, to all points, and I'm sure even out to the cosmos. The contact number, as always, 1-800-848-9222. That's 1-800-848-9222. We call this particular program Theater of the Mind because we open up our minds on many subjects from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism. And to continue with some of those themes, kind of a / aviation American exceptionalism hour, we'll be welcoming to the microphones in just a moment a very interesting guest, ladies and gentlemen, one who's the author of a very interesting book called Gunfighters Rule. Who is he? It is retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, his call sign Bernard Dunn. His story sounds like this, and here it is. Colonel Dunn served 33 years in the United States Marine Corps, rising from private to sergeant to colonel. Marine Cobra attack helicopter pilot, he flew dozens of combat missions and deployed multiple times to high-threat areas in the Middle East. He spent 7 months in Iraq as the commanding officer of HMLA 369, the Gunfighters, supporting Operation Iraqi Freedom. He holds a bachelor's degree from the Old Dominion University and an MBA from Boston University, a master's degree in strategic studies. Colonel Dunn currently serves as president of Strategic Resilience Corporation, which he founded in 2016 to support U.S. military and national security missions around the nation. He joins us as we continue with the Dr. Sky Experience. Colonel, thank you for being up with us this early morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, Dr. Sky, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me tonight.
Oh, it was a pleasure, my friend. You know, to talk about what's going on in the world, we're also going to sidewind into the story of what's happening with Operation Epic Fury. Many people may think they have a lot of information about this particular story, but we're going to go to you as our go-to guy to talk more about that. But, sir, in a solemn moment, I want to pay tribute to all that have lost their lives, men and women, so far in this Operation Epic Fury. And a special salute, because I'd like you to talk about it, sir, about the KC-135, Zeus 95, where all crew members had perished. Please continue and talk about that, because I find that to be a very serious moment when a lot of these individuals from the 121st Air Refueling Wing from Rhinebecker National Air Force Base were involved in this particular crash. Please continue on that, sir.
Well, yeah, it was definitely a tragic event. You have 2 aircraft that are doing a mission, The investigation is not out yet, as everybody knows, but the preliminary is they had a midair collision. There could be many reasons for that. Midair collisions do actually happen a lot more, I believe, than people think, because very often, especially in combat, we almost always fly at least two aircraft. And so there's always two aircraft together. Sometimes they're joining up from two different locations, and sometimes there's many aircraft. And if you think about what was going on with hundreds of aircraft every day doing missions day, night, 24/7. So if you take this airspace and you flood that airspace with aircraft, now you're trying to bring two aircraft together in close proximity. And what takes place oftentimes, and I'm not implying that this happened in this case, you have to wait for the investigation, but what will happen is when you are joining on an aircraft, if you're using an outside controller, for instance, or you may be using your own systems, but you're going to come to that aircraft and you're going to join with them. Many instances, you're going to join to refuel. Other instances, you're going to join just to go together and then go do a mission. So what happens in many cases is you get a closure rate. So one aircraft is doing 150 knots and the other one's doing 155 knots. Mm-hmm. That differentiation of 5 knots is dramatic once you get close to that aircraft. So it takes extreme precision in flying to ensure you don't actually bump into that other aircraft. The only goodness out of this mishap is that we have the other aircraft and crew survived. Yes. You know, many times you'll have a mishap and everybody goes if they bump into each other. It happened to some of my friends when I was a young captain. They were out flying in 29 Palms, California, in Cobras. They hit each other at night, and everybody perished. And so you can only then assess, right? At least this crew will be able to explain what happened, and then we will be able to at least learn from that mishap and ideally prevent them from happening again.
Our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, the Dr. Sky Experience, retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, his call sign, Bernard Dunn. And let me get it right. I do apologize for messing up the name of this organization, where they came from, Zeus 95, the 121st Air Refueling Wing, Rhinebecker National Guard Base in Ohio. That's the information that I'm getting. I hope that is absolutely correct, sir. And again, we mourn the loss of all these individuals, men and women who serve proudly in the United States military. A volunteer group of people. That's so amazing. I did a short stint in the Army, sir, and I had a colonel once come up to me from the Marine Corps and said, well, he goes, you're Army, right? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, you know what that stood for? And I said, what? And he said, ain't ready for Marines yet. And I can't tell you what I said, but hey, I salute you guys too.
Absolutely.
Yes, no, not to be a funny man by any means, but no, this is a very interesting subject, and I want to pass on to the audience. I've flown on KC-135s a number of times and had the honor of being back there with the boomer. And you're so right, Colonel. That's a very, very sensitive dance in the air, right, with two aircraft, because you see the aircraft coming up. For people who've never done this, and I'm sure you've done it a lot and know so much more from the cockpit of flying helicopters and such, other aircraft. But isn't that an amazing experience? You see this aircraft come up from the distance, and they just don't come flying right up to you. Slowly it's a dance, and then the boomer does his or her thing, and they steer that boom, and it has to be a precision, not like going to get gasoline at your local place, but kind of the same technology, a pump and a hose, and you got to make sure that with all the turbulence there, please continue. It's not such an easy thing to do, I would imagine.
Well, it's definitely not. And, as a Cobra pilot, we don't aerial refuel. But I've been in a V-22 Osprey where we aerial refueled, and then I've also flown in a Marine KC-130 and actually flown a Marine KC-130. Wow. But I have joined up on many, many aircraft. Yes, yeah, it's very cool. But I have joined up on many aircraft day and night, right? And so what will take place is that as you're coming in, you have to be 100% focused. And so one of the things that they're going to look at with this KC-130 mishap, well, there's going to be several things. One will be whether or not the crew had their proper crew rest. So you're supposed to, in combat changes everything, But a normal day in the Marine Corps, you're allowed to fly a maximum of 6.5 hours without a waiver.
Didn't know that.
Because it's very high stress. In combat, I don't want to say it goes out the window. You still have to follow the rules, but you get what's called a combat waiver. And then when I was flying in Iraq, I 100 hours a month was not unusual. And pilots were flying even more than that throughout the time. And in this scenario, that's one of the things they're going to look at is how often and how much this crew was flying. The next thing they're going to look at is were they fatigued and were they on any kind of medication. You're not supposed to fly with medication, and what they, you're not supposed to do it. And I will say that I won't say that I've never done it, but you're not supposed to what's called self-medicate. Mm-hmm. So you're not supposed to take medicine without going to see the flight surgeon, because the flight surgeon is going to say, don't take this medicine and fly. And I'm not implying that any of them did this, but the investigation will look at that, and they will take reports from their roommates, their friends, and they'll look into every aspect of every one of these crewmen's lives for basically the last 30, 40 days probably.
Yes,
they'll also look at human factors. Did they have anything personal going on that caused them not to be focused in the airplane? And then one of the most important things they're going to look at is whether they were current and qualified. And so they're going to pull all these pieces together, and then they'll come up with a determination of what happened with this mishap.
Colonel, would you be able to comment on this from commercial aviation, like we see the airlines? Are there even more stringent rules as you're talking about the limitations on, flying so many hours? Is it pretty much in sync with commercial aviation to military, or do they have a whole different set of regulations, if you can share that with us?
Yeah, they have a whole different set, and, they can fly like one of my buddies, his daughter is going through some flight training with the civilian airlines, and she's been doing it for, I think, 2 or 3 years, and she's already got 1,500 hours. And normally in the military, and, every service is different, every airframe's different, but normally in the Marine Corps, I would fly about 300 hours a year, about.
Yes. Wow.
So you got to figure the commercial guys are flying a lot more.
Talk about with us your experience in training to become a Cobra, and then as we talk about the Viper helicopter, a much more advanced, I imagine. I've studied this. And just to let people know that one of our websites that we personally have, I think I shared it with you privately, and I'll share it with the audience. We have a very, as people tell us, a very popular website called photorecon.net about military aviation. And our group, the photographers, are staying on top of that. So I hope you had a chance to take a look at that. And if not, I wanted to share that with the audience. But talk about this, the training that's involved in becoming a pilot in the helicopter side of the world. Again, it's something different than normal aircraft because you're flying on, 3 axes, if I'm correct? I'm not a helicopter pilot, but I'd like you to explain, how does the geometry of that work? Because it seems amazing to me that the thing goes up in the air, and it's some pedals on the ground and a lot more stuff when it's electronic.
That's right, yeah. And by the way, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome flying Cobras. So Marine Corps aviation training, this is kind of how it starts out, is every Marine aviator, they will get down to Pensacola, and you're going to learn how to fly fixed-wing aircraft first. You can fly it in Pensacola, Corpus Christi. Sometimes you go fly with the Air Force. So every Marine pilot has flown fixed-wing first. Then what you do is you'll select out of that fixed-wing training, and I flew the T-34 Charlie. They're flying the T4, I think it's T6 Texan now. T4, T6 Texan.
No,
but that's what they're flying now in training. Good-looking bird. And so then you'll select jets, helos, or propellers. Mm-hmm. And so once you select, so I selected helicopters. Then I went back to Pensacola because I did my primary training in Corpus Christi. I went back to Pensacola, and then I learned how to fly in a Jet Ranger. You learn how to fly that. You learn how all of your normal flying, VFR, and then you go to your instrument flying. And then from there, you select which kind of helicopter you're going to fly. And the way we did it back in the day is you selected on how you graduated. So if you're the number one guy or girl, you got whatever airframe you wanted.
Sounds
and then
logical.
it just went down the line. Yeah. Right. Well, they changed that over time because what was happening, and of course, all my non-Cobra pilots will disagree with this, but all the best guys were getting Cobras.
There you go. Wow.
Right, and they'll all disagree with that, and they'll say that's not true, but it was true. All the best guys were getting Cobras, and the Marine Corps said, well, we have to have quality spread, so then they changed it, and then you would kind of select where you got, and if you were the number one guy, you still got your first choice, but if you were like number 5, you may not get Cobras, or you might get Cobras just based on what's available, but it was based on a quality spread, so that the number 2 guy may not get a Cobra, he may get back then a 46 or a V-22. So it's changed a little bit, but all good.
Well, we're privileged,
Every
ladies and gentlemen.
Great.
Yeah, we're privileged to have retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, callsign Bernard Dunn, with us, talking about many things. Our starting of the radio show, of course, our solemn tribute to those that have lost their lives so far in Operation Epic Fury, the war in Iran as it continues today. We don't know the end game, but we'll be talking more about that with his expertise as we continue our show. But I wanted to qualify something. I've flown, as I mentioned, as a guest in the media on a number of KC-135 flights, but that aircraft, describe it. It's a Boeing aircraft. It came out in the late, I think maybe even the early 60s, maybe even earlier than that. It still flies with new retrofitted engines, and it has some 29,000 pounds of fuel on board. I mean, literally, that is a flying tanker, to say the least. But describe the legacy of the KC-135, if you'd be so kind.
Well, it like you say, what they do is they'll take an aircraft, we'll take an aircraft, and you're going to fly, and each aircraft's going to have a specific number of hours they want to fly in before they retire that airplane. But because they're so expensive and so long to generate new aircraft, and we're still doing this with a lot of our assets, is you'll just refurbish them and refresh them. And so one of the interesting things about these tankers is you can actually track missions with the tankers. And what I mean by that is we did a mission a long, long time ago when I was down at STRATCOM where we had bombed Libya with B-2 bombers.
Wow.
And we were tracking the B-2s, which can't pop up on radars, via the tankers. And one of the generals came down and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Well, we're just watching everything." And he goes, "Oh yeah, erase that off the board. We don't want anyone to know that." So yeah. These tankers are essential. They're essential for all these missions because when your aircraft are taken off from the aircraft carriers, they're going to be low on gas. They're going to take off and they're going to go get gas. And when I was a MU commander, we were doing missions in Iraq. Our Harriers would take off with, some ordnance, and they go right to the tanker. Now, they were using our own tankers, KC-130s. They'd go to the tankers, they refuel, and then they go do their mission. And sometimes these jet aircraft may tank several times on a single mission, especially if they're going on standby. If they're going up to a combat air patrol area where they're going to stay in orbit for a period of time in case something happens that they're escorting, and they may hit the tanker several times on one mission. So these tankers and their crews, they're going to fly long, long hours. And as these aircraft come and go, the one aircraft that's probably flying the most is going to be the tanker because everybody needs gas. So I think you're going to see that fatigue will play some level in this mishap we were talking about earlier. I think fatigue will come into play.
Well, once a Marine, always a Marine, as you know, sir, right to your root of your DNA, and every other person who served in our own military, men and women. But one of the things I miss, we had a big air show here, and actually it's ongoing. Luke Air Force Base has their Luke Days. And one of the things I miss, and I know you'll be proud to talk about it, seeing the Fat Albert of the Blue Angels, the 130, years ago, and you probably can testify to this too, you see it roll down the runway. They call it Fat Albert for a reason. And then you see it with these JATO rocket cans on the side. And oh boy, right, Colonel? You sit in your seat there by the air show and you see this thing take off with the shortest distance And I imagine the G-forces on those people in the front, that must be a wild ride, huh?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. That thing pops up in the air. It just keeps going. So, it's a beautiful thing.
It's a great thing.
I've never been able to fly in Found Albert, but like I said, I had the opportunity when I was a MU commander. We had KC-130s attached to us in the Marine Corps, and so I got to fly some of our own aircraft. That was pretty neat. I didn't do too much with it, but it's a cool airplane.
Well, we appreciate the Colonel's
it's a good thing to have up there.
No, we appreciate your time this early morning for you, sir. And questions and comments. It's rare that we get a Marine aviator talking about things, but we're also going to segue with his permission. He's not a representative of the Department of War. He's retired, but once a Marine, always a Marine. Your questions and comments at 1-800-848-9222. I'm sure we have many former Marines. No, we have still Marines who've retired.
That's right.
That may want to chime in on the conversation. You bet I got that right, because I don't want to misstep when I'm talking to the Marines. And I'm proud to be from the Army, too. So I know you're proud of me, too, and I appreciate that, Colonel, as we talk on the Dr. Sky Experience. But let's get into something I think really interesting. Your book, Gunfighter's Rule. Talk a little bit about it. It talks about your time, your whole path to moving up to being a colonel in the Marine Corps. Not an easy path. Describe what people might find from the book. Interesting.
Well, thanks. So when I was a young lad, my father passed away when I was 11. And he was in the Air Force, and he was always talking to me about the military. And, we'd see Marines on TV, and we'd see, Marine shows like the Sands of Iwo Jima. And as a young kid, I didn't know the difference. I didn't know there was a different. I had no idea there was a different service when I was little. And so as I'm growing up, my dad's telling me, and he's like, "Oh, those are Marines. Those Marines are tough. They're tough." So even though my dad was in the Air Force, I was being groomed to be a Marine. And so I talk about that in the book on how my life as a young lad, we had a bunch of issues as a family. Our house burnt down. Father died. My mother had a stroke. A lot of little things that were huge to a family. And then I joined the Marine Corps, which really grew me up, right? I needed that. And from about the first 5 minutes of being at Parris Island, I knew I was going to stay in the Marine Corps for my whole life. And that's what I talk about the book. And then I talk about how I did different tours as a Cobra pilot, and then I end up as a forward air controller during OAF-1 in Iraq, doing the march up to Baghdad with the fire support team in the Marine Corps back then. And we fought our way into Baghdad, and then we went, we left there, went to Karbala, and I talk about that in the book. And then I talk about how when I came back from that, I end up getting one of my dreams is to command a gun squadron and then go back to Iraq with that outstanding group of men and women to go take the fight back to the enemy back in OAF 06 TAC 0 TAC 1 with the gunfighters. And our motto, hence the name of the book, was Gunfighter's Rule. And so it's a lot about determination and resiliency, and it's a lot about combat and how I managed to maneuver this 33-year career. And not everything's good in the book. I've had some of my Marine friends say you shouldn't have talked about that, because there's a couple bad things in there that I talk about. But
it's truth, right? Your truth is what you're talking about.
Book,
right?
That's
absolutely,
right,
sir. No, it's amazing. And again, our salute to all those men and women who've given their lives to this country. Volunteer. That's an interesting thing to remind everybody. It's a volunteer military. This is still interesting. It's not a draft anymore. And that's amazing. You see the numbers, and I've been checking this out. You're the better person to respond. It looks like all of the forces are meeting their recruitment numbers, if I'm correct. Describe some of that.
Well, here's the deal. You're 100% correct. All volunteer force. And this is the thing that I want the listeners to understand. We were in war for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we still filled our roles because men and women want to defend this country. And then we had an administration where we did a lot of experimentation with DEI and everything, and then recruiting goals dropped, and they couldn't fill them. Now we're back up. We're back at war. We're still filling the roles, and that's because the men and women that are drawn to military service understand what it means to be supported. and they'll join and they'll fight and they'll risk their lives for a country and a nation and an administration that supports them.
Absolutely.
They won't do it, and they will not sell their lives for no reason if they feel that they're not going to be supported. And I'm very proud to say that whether you like the war in Iran, whether you don't like it, everybody should agree that the men and women executing this mission have everything they need to do it. And I'm very proud of that. And this administration should be proud of that on both sides of the aisle.
Resounding yes from me, and not that I'm that important, but everybody listening, I'm sure, would want to chime in on this. You have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to support a gentleman here. He's a retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, his call sign Burner, Dunn, not because he wrote a book, but because he gave his dedication, and then some, as some people say, of course, in the military. All gave some, but some gave all, and that's not just light words, right, Colonel? That's powerful stuff. You know, my short time in the military didn't do much of anything special other than did my job. But the point of the matter is we salute all of our American heroes as we continue here on the Dr. Sky Show. Ladies and gentlemen, I talk about American exceptionalism because we're proud of it, and we have no apology for that, and nor will we ever. That's interesting. In a few minutes before the hard break, sir, we got about 3. Talk to us what it's like to fly in that Cobra helicopter. And now I gather the updated version, the AH-1Z, the Viper. Seems like that's come a long way. I had a few models of that and actually sat in one here in Arizona that you would be proud of. The most beautiful gloss black and gold striping to honor as a military piece of equipment to shine. Tell us about the Cobra helicopter. That's an amazing piece of equipment.
Well, it is amazing. It's multi-role. It can carry a lot of weapons. It can, we used to carry tow missiles. We don't anymore. But Hellfire missiles, rockets, guns. It's sleek. It's small. You can start it up quickly, and you can get into the fight quickly. But I do want to do a shout-out for my Army buddies that were flying H-60s in Iraq. And these men and women would go in hot LZs that I would look down at the LZs and I would say, oh, man, there's no way they're going to be able to go in there. But there was somebody bleeding on the ground, and they didn't care. They went in day, night, guns a-blazing at them. They didn't care. Sometimes, often one of the things that's very interesting was when you're escorting someone in, because we would escort them in, you can't see where the fire's coming from in the daytime. In the nighttime, no problem. Right. That's why everybody liked to fly at night. In the daytime, you couldn't see, so the ground guys would be yelling, hey, they're shooting at you. And the 60 guys or the 46 guys from the Marine Corps, they literally go, I'm coming in anyway. And they would go down in all this gunfire. And we felt helpless as Cobra guys because most of the time we couldn't see where the fire was coming from, so you can't shoot back. But they would go into these zones, pick up a wounded Marine or soldier, and they'd fly out and then do their job, and they didn't even bat an eye. And so that always impressed me. I just wanted to call that out because even though I think Marine Cobras are the best, I still love flying with the Army guys, and they just did awesome.
There you go, sir. We take that break, Colonel, as you know, on radio and television here, the hard break at the bottom of the hour. Your questions and comments, ladies and gentlemen. Rare to get never say former Marine, always a Marine, till the day he passes on to the Valhalla in the sky. We're here with a retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William Burner Dunn, 1-800-848-9222, and we're going to segue into talking more about his opinions about the war in Iran and what people need to know and what's really looking behind the curtain. We'll be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience is on the air. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hoorah! I am Gunnery Sergeant R. Lee Ermey, better known as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman of Full Metal Jacket. When I'm not shining my shoes in brass and keeping my rifle clean, I'm listening to Steve Cates. Hoorah! Semper Fi, do or die. Hold them high at 8th and I.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, at 33 minutes after the hour to the Dr. Sky Experience. Our special guest at the top of hour number 2, retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, his call sign Burner Dunn. Colonel, I thought I'd play that. Lee Ermey was a friend. knew him very well, and thought I'd give that shout out to the United States Marine Corps. How about that one?
I like it. Absolutely. Always good to hear him. You know, I never got a chance to meet him, but he was a motivator for sure.
Well, not to take too much of your time, we were at a firearm convention under the Glock group, and I'm sitting there in this big banquet, and all of a sudden I heard the voice, and I went over to him, and I said, "Hi." I said, "We interviewed you a couple of years ago." And he looked at me. I don't know if he believed it, but he said to me, "How you doing? Have a seat." So I was kind of like nervous, thinking this guy's going to start yelling at me. So I said to him, "How about you do this? Why don't you call my brother on the phone?" Unexpectedly, because my brother knew this guy from the movie. It's unbelievable, without using the adult words that he used when he talked to my brother. My brother just about dropped the phone and laughed so hard because he went into full Hollywood mode there. But what a guy, talking about the United States Marine Corps. And folks, if you haven't seen the movie Kubrick's epic Full Metal Jacket, I highly recommend it. But, Colonel, on a serious note, as we move to the top of hour number 2 here, we have time. And you, ladies and gentlemen, to call in at 1-800-848-9222, a mixed bag of conversational topics, from helicopters and aviation to our solemn tribute to those that lost their lives, all of those soldiers, men and women, so far in Operation Epic Fury, the war in Iran. I continue with asking you, I know you're not a representative of the Department of War, but you've got a lot of vast experience. What can we expect next, in your opinion, in this particular war? And what might be some realistic off-ramps that are looking down the future here? The president seems to be talking that we might have already accomplished the mission, but some doubt that. Well, what say you, sir?
Well, I think we have accomplished wiping out probably 90% of the war-supporting infrastructure of Iran. They shot some very long-range missiles yesterday that we didn't know they had, or at least open source we didn't know they had. It was a surprise. That was a surprise to me. Their Navy's pretty much gone. When I say their Navy, they still have fast attack craft, and they could put a boat in the water any day, but their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Most of their weapons are gone that they could reach out and touch somebody, but they still have them. You know, you cannot win, if you will. You cannot obliterate an enemy from the air in most cases in 3 weeks, because It's just a vast country. So, but the military's gone. It's ineffective. Doesn't mean there's not risk. So we've achieved that objective. I believe we've taken out the nuclear capability for the next 50 years. Of course, other players can always come in. A Russia could bring nuclear capability. A China element could bring nuclear capability, and even a North Korean could bring nuclear capability to Iran if there was a desire to do that. Hopefully they won't. But that objective has been met. When I read the tea leaves, Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, sir, please.
Yeah, when I read the tea leaves, and I got 2 Marine Expeditionary Units heading that way. I commanded the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit from 2013 to 2015, and we went back into Iraq for another combat tour. So when you're sending 2 MUs, that intimates to me that we may be having some Marines on the ground somewhere. And obviously I have great concerns about that. I'm very confident the Marines can do their mission. They're going to crush any adversary they have.
Mm-hmm.
But it's danger. It puts men at risk. It puts Marines at risk. Once you put someone on the ground, you got to feed them, you got to water them, and you got to protect them. And that starts to open up some challenges. So I'm worried about that.
Well, you're right on one thing, too, and plenty of things you're right on. But one of the things yesterday, right, the revelation that they fired these long-range missiles at Diego Garcia. And for people that don't know, right, Colonel, this is a very strategic base, one of the few that we have out in that Indian Ocean, where B-2s, B-1s, all kinds of aircraft and ships and maybe submarines are. So that's a big surprise. I mean, what the heck kind of missiles are those? They're long-range. That's the point.
And we believed... And remember, sometimes things are classified that maybe everybody knew they had these missiles, but they weren't going to talk about them. And maybe that's why President Trump did his attack when he did, because they knew they were going to do that. But open source, I did not know that they had those weapons. And we all believed they could do about half that distance. But that just tells you the enemy always has a say.
Yes, and some hidden weapons that obviously, hopefully, our intelligence and surveillance can take them out very quickly. Interesting, Colonel. Lighting up the phone line here, as I would expect here, and due respect to the callers. Let's say good morning to Martin in upstate New York. Martin, you're on with Colonel William Dunn. How are you this morning? Thanks for your patience.
Good morning, Dr. Sky. Great show, as always.
Thank you.
I've got a question about the SR-71 Blackbird, the spy plane that's been replaced by satellites at this point in time. It's no longer used for spying. But it's the coolest plane and the fastest plane. And what are they doing with these SR-71s? Are they just sitting around doing nothing? I got a suggestion.
Go ahead.
If they're not doing nothing, if they're not doing anything, they could fly them over football stadiums.
Well, that'd be kind of a waste of fuel for such an airplane that's not flying, right, Colonel? It's been decommissioned for a long time.
Just go 300 miles an hour. 300 miles an hour, so there's no sonic boom.
Right. But, Colonel, any comment on SRs? Go ahead, sir.
Well, they're very cool airplanes. It's interesting, right? We just said we were going to get rid of the A-10s, too. Guess what? The A-10s are back in business. They're out hunting.
Sir. Keep those
They're
A-10s.
out hunting fast attack craft. In the Marine Corps, we have moved on, but in the Marine Corps, we were getting ready to get rid of the EA-6Bs, and then we put them back in Iraq for, additional years supporting that, right? But, yeah, I don't know that I want to see SR-71s flying around. That they're an interesting airplane. But who knows? Who knows if we're going to ever use those again? What they do a lot with these airplanes is they go out to Davis-Monthan.
Yes, that's right near me.
It's a base. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they go out to Davis-Monthan, and it's an airplane graveyard. And there's I don't even know the number, but I've been out there years ago, and there was just so many beautiful airplanes just lined up and parked.
Well, interesting,
yeah,
Martin.
We won't see them too much.
No, the Colonel's describing his experiences, but I've sat in that cockpit of the SR with a guy who was the head of the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wing, and we did a whole series of interviews with him. What made that aircraft fly so well is the not-so-secret but very powerful engine, the J-58, which is a different type of engine, but that's an interesting story. Martin, thank you for your interesting observations. SR-71s do not fly, but maybe there's something faster than that. But back on subject, Colonel, I was talking about and getting your opinions on what's happening in this war that's seemingly continuing very strongly over there. I want to ask you, again, not being part of the Department of War, this is not an official statement that you're making, but opinion, which is from your vast experience. Let's talk a little bit about the homeland. We've heard all about these things called sleeper cells, and I did a lot of law enforcement stuff in my life too, which we won't go into. But the intel on this, give us some suggestions of how, people need to just not be alert. If that's really going to happen here, people are saying it could be Easter, it could be the holidays like Passover, God forbid, but we have to be vigilant. What might you share with the audience on sleeper cells from the Iranians?
Well, I would say the sleeper cell is definitely a possibility. Mm-hmm. You have terrorists that came across the border on the watch list for 4 years, millions of people that came across the border unknown. Many of our adversaries sent people over here. I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday that he ran a base out in Yuma, Arizona, and he said a Chinese company bought a hotel right off the base. And now they've since resolved that, but, the threat is real, not just from Iran, but from other countries. I agree. You have to stay vigilant. I am a concealed carry guy, and I try to be concealed carry as much as I can, not because I'm afraid, but because if something happens, I want to be ready to support.
Wow. I'm glad you're saying that, because I've taught that for 30 years and still do, and I know a lot of people around the nation do not have the same ability to exercise those Second Amendment rights, but I won't go too deep into it, but I carry everywhere, and I don't go into the vast detail. I also carry my M4 with me, which to everybody out there is an AR-15. I build them. I know about them. I could talk for years about it, just like you could, sir. But the point is, we don't want to be paranoid, but I'd rather be alert and ready instead of being dead, obviously.
Well, that's right, and we've seen incident after incident just at Old Dominion University, my alma mater. The ROTC students had to take out a terrorist with a knife.
It's amazing what they did. Yeah, totally incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, it was funny because I don't want to call it funny. Not funny like hilarious, but one of my peers put a note that he was, he made like a very verbose comment. And, one of the things that I believe in my heart is I want to kill every one of my enemies. I want to kill them dead in any method that's legal to kill them.
You bet.
But I don't make fun of them when they're dead. You know what I mean? They're my enemy. But eventually, every one of our enemies in the United States that were enemies at one point are now our friends. If you really look at it, right? Japan, Germany, even Vietnam, we're, trading partners. Iran used to be our friend. We want them to be our friend again. So even though I'm all in at fighting and doing it, but once the war's over, the war's over. And my friend made a comment. He's like, and he was very, very verbose about how this guy was killed. And my point was, and I posted, I said, it's a shame these young men and women got exposed to combat at such an early age. It's a shame. Yeah. I mean, it happens, but it would be better, having spent some time in combat, I don't want anyone to ever go to combat again. I wish we never had to do it again. It's not realistic, I know. But it's a shame because nobody gets out unscathed.
Exactly
even if you don't get wounded, nobody gets out unscathed.
Colonel, we got to take that break, as we do in radio here, and they also do that on television. Your questions and comments as we move to the top of hour number 2, 1-800-848-9222. A man who's testifying about his own experience in the United States Marine Corps. Once a Marine, always a Marine, even when we pass on from this world, right, Colonel, to the halls of Valhalla, and to all of our American men and women who served in our great country. And this particular episode, talking aviation and our solemn tribute to those that have lost their lives in Operation Epic Fury, and for that matter, all wars of the United States of America around the world. We'll be right back as we continue to talk with these great subjects and great guests.
This is the Dr. Sky Experience. Always look to the sky. 77 WABC. Now, here's Dr. Sky.
Hi, this is Joe Chuck Yeager. I happen to be the first guy that flew faster than the speed of sound, and it's really a pleasure to participate in Steve's show, Dr. Sky.
47 minutes after the hour. One of the promos that we have there is from the late, great General Chuck Yeager, the first man to fly faster than the speed of sound back in 1947. But entertaining us and filling us in with American exceptionalism is retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William, his call sign Burner Dunn. Thank you so much, sir. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz for a moment. And I looked this up today. Many of the translations that we never get, what is Hormuz? And according to many of the translations, it means a place of dates. But that is a very, very serious location on the earth right now. Talk about some of the updates, what's happening over there, and what do you think we should do as a military strategist? Talk about that.
Well, thanks. And first of all, it's not a surprise that they're going to block the straits. We've been planning this mission for decades. We know, I've always known, everyone's always known that on day one with Iran, they're going to close the Straits of Hormuz. Planned, and we are resolving that as we go. I think we've done a much better job than I expected, even though, I guess there's some reports that it's open, there's some reports that it's closed. It's definitely dangerous, but we always expected it. The big Iranian threat is the fast attack craft out there, and we've been out there. I don't even know how many times I've gone through the Straits of Hormuz, many times. But we always plan and we always expect to see fast attack craft harassing our aircraft, our ships, our aircraft carriers, our boats, and we're going to put assets in there to get rid of that threat. As I mentioned earlier, we got 2 Marine Expeditionary units coming in, 2,200 Marine sailors on each one of those. I'm not sure how these ones are configured, but normally they're going to be configured with 3 ships. You're going to have a contingent of aircraft, On my Mew, I had 12 V-22s, 4 Cobras, 3 Hueys, and I actually got 8 Harriers and 4 53s, plus I had KC-130 supporting me. So I'm not sure what the makeup of these are. They could have more or less aircraft. But they're going in there to help resolve this in one form or the other. So the straits are important, but this is why we have to be energy independent. You know, it's
of course. Yeah, you're so right. Energy independence is what the president's been working on, and now this whole thing strikes us. We had to, I'm giving my opinion here. We had to do something about Iran because, God forbid, they get a nuclear weapon. And the other thing that I'm even concerned about, quickly, your comment on this. What if, with all the cash that they were given from all their oil revenues over the years, not to scare people here, but what if they bought themselves a couple of these nuclear weapons that they could decide if the end game is near, just launch them and fire them because they know what will happen in the retaliatory strike. They could care less. But anything's possible, right, Colonel? But what if they do still have a couple of these hidden away as the last end game for them? What say you on that? Or is that a fictional novel type thing?
No, I think it's possible. When you're in negotiations and the Iranian contingent says we have enough enriched plutonium to make 11 weapons, you have a choice. Believe them or not believe them. And no matter, and I know this is a lot of Trump derangement syndrome, right?
Agreed.
Hitting Iran was eventually going to happen no matter what. It was, we were on a collision course. So does it matter that we did it now or waited 6 months or waited a year or waited until they actually had a weapon? You do not wait. You never want to fight fair against an enemy, ever.
You're right.
You want to go in, overwhelm them, destroy them, and go home and bring all your people home. I don't want a fair fight. If the rules of engagement allow, I'll drop a bomb on them when they're sleeping.
Amazing.
We do not even want to engage them. I don't want to see them. Just drop a bomb on them, and if their weapons aren't loaded, for the listeners out there, if a entity is declared hostile, which Iran was, their military was, you can attack them in any form. They don't have to have a weapon. They just have to be wearing a uniform or be a uniformed military, and you can attack them. You can drop a bomb on their barracks. You can blow up their ships while they're sitting in port. The rules are simple. They're declared hostile. You can attack them anywhere, anytime. You don't have to wait till they're shooting at you. And any commander that does that should be fired on the spot.
Amen.
Because you have to protect your men and women, period.
Well, I like what you say, sir, because, hey, it's straight out, it's common sense, and it's honest from the heart. And this is exactly what we cannot do here in America, ladies and gentlemen, is sit back and just pretend that evil doesn't exist out there. So that's interesting. Just totally amazing. It really is.
Absolutely.
I want to remind people, your website, Colonel William Dunn, DUNN.com. They can learn so much more about you there, sir. But in the time we have left, I just want to ask you these things that were also given to me as talking points, but I always like to come up with my own too. But one of them there is, what are some of the other things that we need to be watching out for about how Iran could attack us, like cyber warfare? Please carry the ball, because you talk about maritime disruption, terrorism, influence campaigns. I mean, it's a horrible thing to think about what they could do to us, and that's why we need to pound the hell out of them to make sure that this doesn't come and become a viral spread around the country and around the rest of the world.
Well, my concern is less what Iran can do to us right now, because I think we know all the things they can do other than being surprised occasionally by long-range missiles. What I am worried about is we are shooting a lot of missiles and bombs and weapons.
Yes.
When we conducted a campaign in Libya when I was at United States Stratcom, and we had to replenish our ships with Tomahawk missiles because they shot them. And so there is a logistics train here, and then you have to have your large, military industrial complex building new weapons. There are unlimited weapons if you keep building them, if you have the money and time to build them. So one of my concerns is that we are going to run low on those, and we have other adversaries out there. We have
right. What if the China situation erupts with Taiwan? I mean, not that we can fight forever. Our spirit will, but the point is, you're right. If you run out of ammo and your powder's not dry, but now it has to become, you need more replenishment of equipment. Look at the Israelis. Apparently they're now low on some of their defensive missiles in their in their shield over the entire state of Israel as a nation. That's an interesting story too. I don't know. It's just amazing. I hope everything gets resolved, but that's a little understatement. This takes a long time to wipe out a scourge like that that's around the world. It's a horrible thing. In closing, sir, on a different subject, talk about Strategic Resilience Group, a group that you founded. What do they do? I mean, that's a fascinating story unto itself.
Well, we have a couple lines of operation. Our number one line of operation is information warfare. We're supporting our brothers and sisters all over the world in this fight right now in a myriad of ways. But we're helping do all we can do in the information domain. We also do data analytics. We've developed a couple tools that are AI tools that support counter-threat financing, finding bad people that do that, as well as assessing some of the information warfare capabilities. We also do training, and then we most recently started doing what I consider very limited support to the Air Force, doing counter-UAS. So we're a small company out of D.C., but we've got the founders are 3 retired Marines, and we're doing everything we can do to support our nation in every facet every day.
Well, I'm honored to have you listen and have you share, that is, your experiences here with this audience. Proud to be an American, but I got to ask you this. Maybe people don't ask you often enough, and everybody who's listening, what does America mean to you, sir? Tell us.
Everything. We are the greatest country. We got our faults, right? It's like we have our faults, but we only talk, we should only talk about our faults to other Americans. And, you don't talk about faults with your family to your neighbors, just your family, right? Yep. But America is the greatest country in the world. And no doubt. We are the leaders. We need to be the leaders. And we need to not be ashamed of being the greatest country in the world. We need to be proud of that. And that's what we need back.
Wow. Well said in this very short but informative hour here. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate all of you listening here. A very special moment here. Again, as we end off our show, our solemn tribute to those that have lost their lives, not only in this particular episodic of war, Operation Epic Fury, but to the men and women who've given their lives to the greatest nation, as you said, sir, and I second that simple nomination, the United States of America. And I say this to people when I teach firearm classes and all the other things that we do here, other than talk about science and technology. I say, how do you know what rights you lost if you never knew what rights you had? So that's an interesting understatement, wouldn't you say, Colonel?
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
Appreciate your time, sir.
If Iran had a Second Amendment, this war would be over already.
Absolutely. And maybe when they're free, we can teach and you can be the leader of helicopter training for tourism, and you can also have a backup Cobra flying, fully loaded. What's the gun on there, a 20-millimeter chain gun or a 30? What is it?
20-millimeter cannon.
Wow.
It's a beautiful thing.
That's one rifle that I don't have, a 20-millimeter, because it would probably knock me on my ASS in rapid order. Thank you. Well, thank you, sir, for being with us. Again, retired United States Marine Corps Colonel William Berner, his call sign Dunn. He salutes America, gives us some insight, and to learn much more about his book, Gunfighters Rule, and all the things that he does with Strategic Resilience Group, LLC, check him out at Colonel William Dunn. That's DUNN.com. Colonel, thanks for your time, and God bless America, my friend, as we have say thank you for being up early morning for you. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, and thanks for having me. Have a wonderful night.
You bet, sir. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this exciting edition, in my opinion, and many others. If you have an email from me, it's drsky@wabcradio.com. And stay tuned as the beat continues here on this great, powerful powerhouse radio station, Talk Radio 77 WABC.